Welcome to episode 38 of After the Breach. Sara is already laughing. She's going to be the star of this episode because we're going to be talking about the killer whales of Bremer Canyon down in Australia, where Sara has just spent the last month or so, month and a half.
Yeah, almost 2 months.
And she's going to tell us a little bit about her trip. We'll get into the orcas of Bremer Canyon. We've done previous episodes on them from last year when I had joined you down there and April was with us. And we'll get some updates and recaps and a little bit more info about them. Welcome back, Sara.
Oh, it's good to be back, Jeff. And welcome back from Florida.
Thank you. Ahoy.
I hear you saw some not whales down there.
Did not see whales down there, but
you saw some manatees.
I did see some manatees, and that was a first for me. So that was pretty cool. It was cold down there, and when it's cold, they go hang out by the power plant because of the warm water discharge.
Oh, that's where I'd be too.
Exactly. There were a few hundred of them. It was actually pretty cool.
Awesome.
They were just kind of laying around and hanging out, and yeah, it was really neat to see. Not as neat as killer whales.
Or as humpback whales.
Which
we're heading down to the Silverbank next week.
So by the time this episode airs, we will be in the Silverbank, I think, when this thing airs.
Yeah, well, at least you will be.
I will.
I might be on my way back,
but yeah, we got 1 week with the podcast trip, and I decided to hang around for one more week and do back-to-backs.
That's okay. I'll wave forlornly at you as we drive away in the bus, just like last time.
Yeah, and I'll go chasing the bus, being sad that all my friends are leaving. But no, we're doing our podcast trip to the Silverbank next week, and then I'll be on for one more week, and we'll be bringing you. We're going to record a podcast from the Silverbank and have a pretty cool trip report, we hope. And we're going to do another episode down there with one of the guides talking about professional guiding. And
should be a lot of fun.
Which will be a lot of fun. She's going to be an awesome guest. So
yeah, we get a lot of questions from people about how to get into it. And, I think a lot of people feel like they have to kind of join an existing company as like a naturalist or a deckhand or what have you. And there's so many different, avenues of pursuing your place in the whale community or, wildlife community. So It's just cool to get some other perspectives.
Yeah, that'll be a cool episode. And we'll have a lot of info for people that are interested in getting into guiding, professional guiding with whales and wildlife. But before we get to that episode, let's dive into Bremer Canyon killer whales. For those listeners who may not have listened to our previous episodes about Bremer Canyon and where this is, what you're going to see out there. You were down there. This was your fifth or sixth time down there?
Fifth time down, and third, I've done the last 3 years consecutively.
And you've been down there the last few years taking research data for Orca Behavior Institute. Mm-hmm. And you've also been helping with ID catalogs. But tell us a little bit about where this is and who these whales are.
Yeah. So Bremer Canyon, for those that are, like Jeff said, hadn't listened to a previous episode or haven't heard about these whales in general, Bremer Canyon is off the south coast of Western Australia. So it's in the Southern Ocean and still in the state of Western Australia. You fly into Perth. It's like a 5.5, 6 hour drive from Perth down to Bremer Bay. This small community down there on the south coast. And Bremer Canyon is about 24, 25 nautical miles offshore from there, out on the edge of the continental shelf. And very cool documentary. We'll link it in the show notes about how they kind of discovered these whales out there. But essentially there's a group of killer whales that use the edge of the continental shelf. They're kind of generally found in the 1,000 meter contour line. And as far as we can tell, they're generalists. So they're eating squid, fish, and beaked whales. So really cool.
And have you personally witnessed them eating all of those things?
I have personally witnessed them with squid in their mouths, and I've seen them taking down beaked whales. And we believe that they're taking tuna as well. We've seen them kind of in and around tuna with like oil slicks popping up, but I've never seen them with like a tuna in their mouth.
Ooh, that'd be a cool picture.
Yeah.
So how many of these whales are there? What's this population like?
Yeah. The truth of it is we don't really know, right? We have about 250 animals that we've cataloged so far. And just to kind of put this out there and to give kudos where they are deserved. The first catalogs were done by the Orca Project through Curtin University, Dr. Beck Wellard, and there's some other researchers now working on this as well. Isabella Reeves, John Totterdahl, they're all doing some great work down there with the killer whales and maintaining this catalog. So they started that back in the mid 2010s, and we think about 250. But every year that I've been out, we've seen whales that we either haven't seen for years and years and aren't in the catalog, or we've seen whales that we've not seen before. So there are individuals out there very regularly being found that are not cataloged. So it could be a much larger population than that.
So that's one of the coolest things from my experience down there last year. And I saw you had some Facebook posts about this year, is the frequency of seeing whales that are not cataloged and have never been seen with whales that are frequently seen and well documented.
Like they're obviously a part of this population because they're intermixed with the whales that we see very frequently. And, they're hanging out like we would expect whales in the same population to do. But they're ones that, for the 10 years plus that they've been running tours out of there have not seen.
That it's just so cool to me. I mean, the equivalent of here for those listeners who are in this local area and know the whales very well, it would be like the T-137s who show up quite often in this area and down in Puget Sound, showing up with 4 whales that no one's ever seen before. They're not in any catalogs. No one's ever seen them. I mean,
right.
And for something like that to be happening frequently, it's a never thing here.
Yeah.
But down there, it happens, once or multiple times a season. How many days did you end up with whales that like new whales, not just new to you, but new to our world?
I'm still working with Machi Yoshida, who works with for Naturaliste Charters, and
let's give a shout out to them as well.
Yes, we will. Big shout out. And I'll make sure to do kind of a more extensive one here before the episode is over. But, so we're still kind of working through the whales that we saw in December and January. We do think there are some new whales, potentially, I think 5 to 6, maybe more than that, that we had not cataloged before, but we're kind of just working through and making sure that we're not missing them. The catalogs are, some of them are older, so it's and have like one side or the other, don't have eye patch shots. So it's a little bit tough to 100% confirm. So we just want to make sure that we're looking through all of those before we, say, yeah, it's a brand new whale.
Very cool. And you did have, I saw in some social media, you did have some brand new whales because they were little calves.
Yeah. So actually our first trip out on December 11th, we got out there to the Hotspot, and they had been running birding tours before, for like the 4 days before that, and hadn't seen killer whales, but they weren't looking for killer whales, but they were out at the Hotspot. They were just kind of like drifting and looking for birds, and had not seen killer whales. And so I think there was a little bit of nervous energy going out on our first killer whale trip on the 11th, wondering if there were going to be killer whales out there. And sure enough, we get to the Hotspot, and it's like, oh yeah, there they are. But it was Taddy's group, and we saw Taddy last year several times. But there were not one, but 2 new calves, in her group. And, by the time we usually see calves, they're, 6 to 8 months old. So we knew they hadn't been seen the previous season. Previous season ended in April. But the calves were obviously not brand new. So probably, that like 6 to 7 months old. And when we first saw them in December, having been born in the winter, which is something we used to see with the southern residents here, right? They would socialize in the summer, females would get pregnant, and then 18 months later, which would be the second winter following that, that's when they would give birth. And that's what we typically see with the Bremer Canyon whales. I mean, not 100% right. There's exceptions to every rule, but we usually first see the calves and they're a little bit older. So had those two the first day.
Very cool.
Yeah. Really cool.
And you had whales your first day out.
Yeah. I think we had whales most days. I think we only had one no whale day the whole time I was there.
The success rate down there is incredible.
And it was maybe like 5 days from the whole time that we didn't have a trip because of weather.
That's amazing. I mean, the success rate down there, our success rate here, I think, is incredible. And theirs is higher than ours, at least during their season for killer whales.
Yeah. And amazing because it's a wide open ocean, right? You know, it's not like there's a lot of eyes out there like on shore looking around or other boats helping you find the whales. You're basically going out into the great blue open ocean and hoping you find killer whales. And they're usually there. Right.
You're 30 miles offshore at the shelf. And you mentioned the hotspot. And I don't remember if we talked about this on our last episode about Bremer, but it's worth talking about again. Can you talk a little bit about the hotspot and the bathymetry that's there and how, like, when you're going out and you're saying you're in this big blue ocean. Yeah. But you're going to the hotspot.
Yeah. So the hotspot's kind of just a term that Naturaliste Charters coined. I believe it was them. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it kind of refers to this area in what we call the Bremer Canyon system. And the Bremer Canyon system is a series of canyons that all kind of stem out of the Bremer Canyon, which is this like larger canyon. And just like, you know, the Grand Canyon, think of that, but underwater. And I kind of explain it to people on the boat who are asking about how this looks underwater is like, think of a river mouth and how they kind of like split out into all these like little, you know, I don't
tributaries.
know. Tributaries. Yeah. As they kind of come out to the ocean or whatever, you might have these all like little fingers. There's a bunch of different canyons that kind of split off this larger Bremer Canyon. And that transect the continental shelf up into, 80 meters of water as you're coming out, from Bremer Bay. And then dropping off, to 750 meters to 1,000 meters, all the way down to, 3,000 plus meters deep.
Wow.
So that they're kind of patrolling along this 1,000 meter contour line usually, but not always, right? They can move wherever they want to. But generally speaking, we kind of find them in that range. And we believe they're just like kind of scouring the canyons, listening for beaked whales or listening for other prey they potentially want to predate on. So, yeah.
So they go out to this one spot every day, and it's not like, this one little,
right.
It's,
and there's a bunch of canyon systems along the continental shelf off the south end of, Australia. And it's not a phenomenon that we don't see elsewhere in the world. But I think one of the things that makes Bremer Canyon unique is that there is a natural fuel seepage from the seafloor. So they get some methane and other, natural fuel leaks kind of in gas that create this really rich nutrient layer that kind of works its way up through these different current systems. So currents coming up from Antarctica will push that nutrient dense layer up into the photic zone, which is like the top 200 meters of water where light can penetrate. And then that helps the phytoplankton bloom. So then the zooplankton come in to feed on the phytoplankton, and it brings in, this whole food web. And generally speaking, in the summer down there, the Lewin current, which comes kind of around the west side of Australia, slacks off a bit. So the surface current isn't as strong, and those deeper currents can kind of push that nutrient dense water up towards the surface.
Interesting. And so that's why the killer whales are there at that time.
We believe so.
Because their prey are there.
Yeah. And the thing is, we don't really know where they are when we're not there. So they could be there all year round.
Interesting.
We don't know where they go outside of this time, if they go anywhere.
But there's no whale watching or any other boats out there the rest of the year. Is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of. There's no whale watching out there. I'm sure other boats go out there, but it's very, very sparse and kind of potentially not even out to the shelf. And there's not a whole lot of like shipping traffic out there as well. So the only other recorded sighting, so we had one group known as the Augusta group is kind of what I refer to them as, or Fui's group. And it's this, they're not like super rare, but we see them maybe once or twice a year when I'm down there. I see them once or twice a year when I'm down there. They might see them more than that when, I'm only there for a little bit of the season. But they were seen in the winter in the Lewin Canyon system, which is like south of Augusta, about 200 miles to the west.
Of Bremer.
Of Bremer.
Okay. All right. So they're getting around.
Yeah, potentially. We just don't, we haven't seen any of the other individuals or family groups any other time of year anywhere else.
And are there family groups that you're seeing down there when you're collecting your data that are kind of mainstays? Like you're always going to see this group down there? I
mean, in the last 3 years, I would say, yes, there are groups that I expect to see. And I would say like Nat Charters expects to see them because they've, seen them for the last 11 years that they've been running tours down there. But again, we have such a short, data set that what I call normal might not be normal. Sure. It might just be this like kind of window.
Right. You're only talking about a little over a decade.
Right. Right. But yes, so Split Tip's group, which you saw Split Tip, iconic.
Yeah. All 3 times that I've been to Bremer.
Yeah.
Have seen her.
So she's still kicking, still leading the group, still very curious and comes over to the boat.
I said 3 times, but it's 2.
2. It's okay.
I'm like, wait, 3 times. When was my third? Next year. My third.
Year.
Yeah, I'm just
counting next year. Yeah. So she's one that we'd expect to see. And she has, right now, we believe the largest group in the canyon system, right about 23 individuals. And prior to this year, we were still seeing them as a fairly cohesive unit. They were kind of most of the time all together kind of in the same general area. And this winter was a little bit different. At least, everything I say, caveat this, is applicable to me just being down there. So things can change. Things can be different from when I'm not there. But for the time that I was down there this year, it was different. So they had actually kind of broken up into 3 different groups, and Split Tip kind of like bounced between them. She was most frequently with a mom and her youngest, and we presume her son. So Flapper Wonks. Do you remember Wonks?
I do.
The male, he's getting very big. And then Lil Machi, the younger kiddo in that group. So she was most frequently with them, kind of making a foursome. But we would see her bounce between the 2 other groups too. So they were generally speaking, in the same larger vicinity to each other, but they kind of kept to these smaller groups this year instead of being one large cohesive group. We saw them all together maybe twice, but it was during a predation.
Okay. Interesting. I do want to get into some stories. But before we jump into that, can you talk a little bit about the data that you're collecting when you're down there and what you're seeing? Anything that you're seeing yet from that, or are you still really just collecting data and waiting to get a bigger data set before diving into it?
Yeah. So the data set that we're taking is one that we use up here, that Orca Behavior Institute collects with Biggs killer whales, with southern residents, with northern residents. It is a methodology that Rich Osborne used back in the 70s. And it basically, what we're trying to do is kind of remove our interpretation of their behaviors from it. So when I'm out there, I'm just really noting like, okay, here's where I'm seeing the whales. Here's how many whales that are here. How fast are they going? How tight are they traveling to each other? Are they directional or are they non-directional? And then any other behaviors like percussives or spy hopping or prey pursuit, what have you. So instead of saying like, oh, the whales were socializing, or, oh, the whales were sleeping, or what have you, we're just kind of writing down what we see. So we're not interpreting behavior.
Sure.
That may not be an accurate interpretation. So that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years. And as far as like what we're seeing, it's still early. So I would say that, we're going to hopefully be able to compare these whales to themselves over time as environmental factors kind of shift. This year being different because it's a La Nina year. We've gone from El Nino to La Nina. So we'll see if there's any kind of difference in the behavior in that regard. And then eventually also being able to compare them to the other populations where we've been collecting that same data set. So don't have anything right at this moment, but we are talking about doing a couple papers here in the next year or so.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys find from that.
Yeah.
So tell us number one standout moment from this season.
Okay.
I know there's tons because you're out there every day.
And they're not all whale ones, but my top whale one.
That's fine. No, we want to hear. Yeah. Tell us the whale one and tell us the non-whale ones. And I'm going to want more than one, but I just figured we'd start with when you think back on this season, what's the one encounter that just jumps out at you?
There were so many, but I have to say, so the first time I went to Bremer Bay was in 2017. Rachel and Spencer were going down to Australia as they normally do, them being Jeff's partners in the business in Maya's Legacy. And they were like, hey, meet us down in Western Australia. And I was like, you bet. I've never seen whales for my birthday. And I think at 30 something years old, I should see some whales for my birthday whales. Everybody deserves it.
Everyone should have birthday whales.
So that was my first year down there, had birthday whales. I was actually just looking back at the photos to see who I saw and saw who is now a grown male before he had sprouted.
Cool.
Yeah, really cool. So that just kind of carried over. So that was how I got down to Bremer Bay, or one of the reasons we went out there. And this year, out on my birthday, and honestly, I just love going out. Whatever we see, we always kind of had this running question like, oh, what do you hope to see today? And by the end of my time there, I'm like, well, anything. Like, I'm just happy seeing whatever we see. So we went out and had a couple of families in the morning, like Tattie's group and Split Tips group and another whale from another group that was kind of just an odd man out at that point. And, just kind of your average behaviors, traveling, really beautiful day. So as we were heading back to the hotspot before we headed in just for the day, we saw in the distance, some more blows and dorsal fins. And we were like, great, let's go see who we have. And pretty clear from a distance, it was Nibbles. You remember our big bull Nibbles? You got very soaked. Very soaked when I was
taking photos of Nibbles. Yes.
So he is part of a family of, a group of 5. There's 3 females, a juvenile, and Nibbles. So all kind of older whales. And we, had seen them like 2 days before this, the 5 of them. And so we're kind of coming up and just getting first looks. And I'm like, oh yeah. Okay. That's Nibbles. And, we have the other whales here. And then as I'm watching, I just see this tiny little blip next to one of the females. And I was like, kind of startled myself. And I was like, no, that couldn't have been what I thought I saw. Could not have been. But sure enough, brand new calf, Jeff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like brand new.
Brand new. So obviously no more than 3 days old, but really the fin was still very soft. It wasn't fully up. And so probably less than 24 hours old, swimming in there next to a comma. And so birthday whale on my birthday whale.
That's
on
really,
my birthday.
That's really, really sweet.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
I had not heard that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, happy birthday.
Thanks. And to the little one. So we named it Wren.
I was going to say,
fairy wrens.
I was going to say it should be named Sara.
No, no. But yeah, that was a really sweet moment. So we just, we didn't spend very long with it because, brand new calf. We wanted to make sure the family had space and time to bond with it, but they actually brought it right by the boat twice. So we got some good ID shots on it. And then it was our time.
And of course they did, because those killer whales are curious about boats and people. And it makes sense that they would bring the calf.
Yep.
And these are very different. This population, very different from the endangered southern residents. I probably think more similar to our bigs, where the population is doing very well.
And I think genetically they're most closely related to our bigs killer whales. So
yeah, and they're both those populations are doing extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's like the boat thing is really not a big deal.
No. Yeah. Yeah, and a comma, if you remember last year, the whale that kept like rolling upside down and like coming so slow towards the boat, belly up multiple times, that was her.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do remember that. Mm-hmm. So any other standout stories? I know you did. I'd love for you to tell a story because I remember bits and pieces of it with Swirl, who is one of my favorites. And I think that she got dropped off. She was out venturing away and somebody dropped her off with her group or something. It was something like that.
That's what we think.
Okay.
Yeah. So of course I'm keeping track of Swirl because that's your favorite whale out there. She's part of Cookie's group, or El Nacho's group is the big male with the big notch in his fin. And we'd actually seen her and El Nacho kind of away from their family, away from the rest of their group a couple of times with other whales like Split Tip's group or Taddy's group. And it was just kind of an interesting observation to make because usually they're one of the like most cohesive groups. They're usually all together. And I would say of all of the groups, would expect to see them by themselves the most and not kind of like interacting with other groups. But Swirl, even after that, Swirl, we would see her with Split Tip's group or with other whales, and she'd just kind of be in among the game. We actually saw Oreo, we think El Nacho's younger sibling, off with Split Tip's group too. So there's like some roaming around going on. But yeah, one day we got on scene with Cookie and the rest of her family. There's 6 of them usually. And I was like counting them, they're coming up close enough that I'm like trying to do my count every time to see who's where. And I'm like, oh, Swirl's missing because I'm always looking for Swirl for you. And she has such a bright, very distinct saddle patch.
Very distinct.
I was like, oh, Swirl's not here. She must still be off, gallivanting with another group. It wasn't too much longer after that, probably 30 minutes or so. We see in the distance other whales coming in, and it was Split Tip's group. And they didn't even stop. They didn't join up or anything, but they came kind of close by. They did a little pass and then swam off. And then Swirl was back with her group. So I think, I'm just assuming that Swirl was with her and then they kind of just dropped her off back with the fam.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Any standout predations, anything like that you hadn't seen before or just remarkable?
I mean, we didn't have as many like surface pursuits. So we had a couple last year that, were pretty amazing. So we had 2, I think this year, one that was pretty good. Not for the beaked whale. But it was interesting to watch. And then there was a lot of squid predations kind of earlier in the season, like in December, we saw a lot of them with squid in their mouths and that kind of thing, playing with squid. But yeah, we had one predation with a strap-toothed beaked whale that was at the surface, and it was actually Split Tip did the takedown. I have a photo of her grabbing the beaked whale and taking it down. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of brutal to watch, but very interesting to watch too.
Yeah. The predations are very remarkable. Did you have the same experience that I saw last year where a predation would start with a small group of killer whales and then there were whales coming in from every direction in the distance?
Not so much, actually. It was really kind of like the group was there. We had one, well, I guess this one. So Split Tip was with the beaked whale, and then Taddy's group kind of came in, but they had already kind of been in proximity. But we didn't have any like last year where you had one small group with the beaked whale, and then all of a sudden you're seeing whales from like all over kind of coming into it. I'm not sure what that was about. But yeah, no, we didn't really see that in the same way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What did you see? What kind of things did you see this year that we didn't see last year?
Whale wise? I think
anything wise.
Oh, I saw some cool birds. I saw some really cool rare birds down there this year. I was pretty stoked about. I feel a little guilty about it because they were such cool birds and there weren't any birders on board. Like they'd missed it by a day or two. And I was like, man, why do I get the privilege of seeing these birds when they shouldn't? So I saw an Amsterdam albatross, which is one of the rarest birds in the world, apparently. It's only the third recorded sighting in Australia.
Wow.
And there's about, I think they estimate like right around only 300 left in the world.
Whoa.
And they breed on Amsterdam Island in the South Indian Ocean. So, I got some photos of that. It was really cool.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did you know what it was when you saw it?
No, it looks like a wandering albatross, but they're a lot more brown on them. And so I thought it was just a juvenile wandering albatross. So I got some photos and I sent it to, our bird guy, Dan Mantle.
Our bird guy
On board. He's amazing.
Our bird guy. Does he like being referred to?
I'm sure he's just, amazing bird expert. He puts up with all my questions, but I sent it to him. I was just like, I'm assuming this is just a juvenile wandering. It's a lot of brown. And he was like, no. It told me what I'd seen. And it was just really like,
that's
amazing.
That's remarkable. It was pretty neat.
Yeah. I think he had seen one in Bremer, maybe in 2016 or 2017, and then one in Tasmania. And those are the only other two sightings.
Wow. That's really incredible.
Yeah. But all those like feeding events, predations, those bring in the birds. So even on my last day, we were, they had predation. We didn't see the takedown or anything, but there was obviously like a predation that happened. There was an oil slick and everything. And I, was taking photos of whales. And as I'm going through them later, I realized there was a bird that I had never seen before and it was a brown skua. So
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's okay. I didn't either, but I was like, it's not a shearwater. So again, sent it to Dan and
the bird guy,
and he was kind enough to put up with, again, all of my bird questions.
What, other than bird, what other species, any other whale species? What else did you see?
We saw pilot whales a few times. And then common dolphins, bottlenose dolphins. We didn't see any false killer whales this year. I think we saw those one day last year while you were there.
We did see pilot whales when I was there in passing, because we were pursuing a prey pursuit, and I was like, I want to see the pilot whales because I've never seen them. That was my only, the long finned pilot whales. So
we saw them just a handful of times. Though the day we found that newborn killer whale, we had pilot whales on the way out, and there was a brand new pilot whale calf that I got a photo of. And I don't even think the dorsal fin was upright. It's hard to tell, but it was tiny. So that was cool too. But not very, just a handful of times that we saw them this year. So
very cool.
Yeah.
What else do you want to share about your experience this year in Bremer before we,
what would you like me to share?
Just anything that, I do want to talk about, like, for anybody that wants to go down there and experience this. It's really January through April, maybe a little bit into December. It's a long trip if you're coming from the States. It's a much shorter trip if you're coming from Australia.
Potentially.
I know we have listeners down there, so it's a much easier trip, but you got to get to Perth, and then you got to go down from Perth, down to Bremer Bay. And if you do go down there, which if you want to deep dive into whales and want to experience orcas other than in the Salish Sea, I think it's in my experience with not everywhere around the world, but I think that is the go-to spot.
I would agree.
If you want to experience killer whales outside of the Salish Sea. And if you go, and I'll have Sarah talk a little bit more about this, you want to go with Naturaliste Charters. There are only two companies down there, and just like everywhere else, who you choose matters. And you want to go with Naturaliste Charters.
Yeah, they're great. And I wax poetical about them on my social media posts, not just because they have been kind enough to let me come out with them, but just because they really are amazing at what they do. They are so attentive to their passengers, and because it's a long day out there and it's not flat conditions. So it's definitely an expedition. It's not your just, kind of average boat ride. So they really take great care, and consideration for their passengers and comfort. And that boat is just amazing. So it's custom built, purpose built for the Southern Ocean. But they're also extremely responsible and ethical operators. They really, really do take great pride in operating ethically around the whales. So it's very different from what we do up here. Regulations are different, but they're great. So yeah, I could just go on and on about them. Really. They're just amazing. So
yeah, every time I've been out with them, it's been fantastic. Incredible crew.
Yeah.
Awesome captains. The owner is amazing. Yeah. And they're really the ones that started this.
And yeah, they are. And we'll link them in the show notes so you can check them out. But they do run tours year round. So the Orca tours are January through April. But if you're in Western Australia at other times of year, they do run tours from Dunsborough and Augusta for the migration of humpback whales, blue whales. Sometimes they get southern right whales as well. So definitely jump on board with them. But what I'll tell you, and I tell this to passengers on our boats as well, and anyone that, kind of come up into conversation about whale watching, is you will find people that drive around whales and you'll find people that drive with whales. And I don't mean like in a physical sense of being like in and among them, but that know how to read the animals and just understand their behavior and even so far as to like kind of how they're feeling that day. Cause we all know, just like people, like whales sometimes are doing their own thing and they just know how to drive with whales, right?
I love how you just put that. I've never heard that before. And it's so true.
And then there's people that just, they drive a boat around whales, but they're not really like paying attention to what the whales are doing. They're just there to drive a boat around whales.
And, from my perspective, like that's not a dig about, because you can then get subgroups of people that drive around whales. There are some people that drive around whales responsibly.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
some people that drive around whales irresponsibly.
Right.
But driving with whales is really the goal.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody put it so well. Good job.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So I think they do that very well. I see it with all of their crew. So just a really, really deep appreciation for what they do. And they really are contributing to science as well. It's not just about having me on board. In fact, that's probably the bare, minimum of it. But, Paul, the owner, is really working to collect data. They have their own data collection protocol, that they're doing. They're expanding it all the time, looking at what they can collect while they're out there observationally and non-invasive to understand what's happening in that ecosystem and with those whales and kind of, do what they can to expand their knowledge so we can support that ecosystem and protect the whales and all that great stuff. So it's just a really, really great operation that they have.
Yeah. So they're the go-to down there. And I'm hoping to get back there next year.
Better.
I know. I was thinking about it every day when I was in Florida, that I missed being down there. It is such a great experience, and the crew is awesome. The boat is awesome. I did hear you did mention they don't have their croissants every day now, which is a bummer.
They don't have their croissants any day, but they have wonderful focaccia instead.
I know, but I love those croissants. But I'll get over it. But I do need to get back down there. It is going out there every day while I was down there was just incredible.
Yeah.
And then we will be back with more information about our trip to the Silver Bank with the North Atlantic humpback breeding and calving waters. We'll be talking about with Conscious Breath Adventures will be the company we're going out with there, the go-to there. So that will be our next episode. And in the meantime, we are taking reservations with Maya's Legacy Whale Watching for our spring, fall, and late fall, early winter tours for 2025. Mm-hmm. You can look on our website, sjiwhalewatch.com, and mention you're a podcast listener so we can, one or both of us can be on your tour if possible. And we also have some After the Breach all-day tours scheduled this season. What are the dates of those, Sarah?
Well, we normally just do one in the fall, but we have enjoyed them so much that we decided that we were going to do one in the spring as well. So our next one coming up is going to be on May 17th and 18th, Saturday and Sunday. And then we'll have one in September on the 20th and 21st.
So reach out.
Yep.
If you want to come.
All days on the water, catered.
Both days. Mm-hmm. for each workshop, catered lunch, lots of fun with Sara and I, lots of whales, lots of wildlife, and hope to see you there. So reach out, After the Breach podcast at gmail.com or After the Breach on Instagram
and Blue Sky
and Facebook.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'm excited for the Silverbank.
Me too.
It hasn't been a long time. It was there last year, but man, it's one of my favorite experiences in the world. I'm so excited to see what this year brings, because every year is different.
Yep.
And in the meantime, no matter what you do,
stay safe out there. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of After the Breach podcast. If you've enjoyed it and want to help us out, please share this with your friends, family, and any other whale-loving folks you can think of. We would also love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have topics you're interested in and would like to hear on the show, please send us an email. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can find us on Instagram as @AfterTheBreach and on Facebook as After the Breach Podcast. And if you'd like to go whale watching with us, then come on up to San Juan Island, Washington State. We run tours with Maya's Legacy Whale Watching, departing just steps away from the ferry landing in beautiful downtown Friday Harbor. It's a great destination for a day trip or multiple days and offers some of the best whale and wildlife viewing in the world. We would love to take you out on the water to see the amazing whales we talk about on our podcast. You can book a tour through the company website at www.sjiwhalewatch.com and make sure to mention you're a podcast listener when you book. Thanks again for listening, and remember, stay safe out there.